Welcome back to another episode of Inside Voices, a teacher podcast made by teachers for teachers. I'm your host, David.
And I'm Laura.
And remember, in here, we use our inside voices. Welcome back to this week's episode. This week we're going to be talking about technology in education. This was the first ever subject we ever spoke about on this podcast, and we thought we'd revisit it because we just had a trip down south. We'll get to that in a minute, but we just had a trip down south that was all to do with education, technology, and to be honest, we're feeling quite inspired. So we want to share some of our learning and we want to discuss it, don't we, Laura?
And quite tired, I might add.
Yeah, we're
quite inspired and tired. Put that on a t-shirt.
Why didn't we name the podcast that?
That would have been a great name for that. Anyway, I digress.
Write that down for our future merch store.
Please, I'm copywriting that.
Yeah,
if anyone's listening to that, I can,
yeah,
I
that's
know.
our website.
I can absolutely guarantee someone's going to get to it before we do.
To be honest, though, it was a good time, wasn't it?
It was.
We went down, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, I know we've got stuff to speak about, but we went down for 3 days to London and we spent it at the BET conference, and to be honest, our minds were blown, and there was so much technology on show that we've never seen before. It was just quite awe-inspiring, wasn't it? I know that's quite cheesy. But,
no, it was.
And we're going to share some of that towards the end of this episode. So if you keep on listening and tune in for the whole episode, you'll get some tips and tricks that we picked up at the conference towards the end. But cycling back a little bit, backpedaling a little bit, circling back, we want to talk about technology generally to begin with. The role it plays in the classroom in 2024. What would you describe the role compared to like 20 years ago? What is the role technology plays nowadays in a modern classroom?
I think it's something that's definitely integrated into pretty much everything you do. I mean, I think about my day from the beginning to end. Even take your smart boards, for example. If my smart board didn't work for a day, I'd actually be lost, genuinely, because it makes things from demonstrations so much easier. You've got a dice on the board, you can use that, all of those things that are probably deemed relatively straightforward in terms of ed tech, but are...
She is speaking about like a £4,000 piece of equipment, and she mentions a dice. Are you kidding?
I mean like an interactive one, and I also, sorry for the bang if you heard that, I just dropped my phone. But I think it's something now that if you even just think of your basic things you do, right? Ordering lunches. Yeah. Do you remember when we were at school, you used to have to sit and say what you wanted for lunch? It would take so long. You sit there and be like, hot lunch, cold lunch, sandwich. It took so long. And then now they come in and they order it on the smart board, and I don't even need to know what the lunch options are until someone says to me, I don't like any of them. And I'm like, well,
tough cheese.
Your gal's not a chef, so I can't do much about that. But even little things like that, it just makes life, you don't have to send a register downstairs. That sounds so silly to be saying it's a big piece of technology, but when you think of all the basic things you do in your classroom that just run so much more smoothly because of ed tech, and it's probably something relatively basic, but we're used to using every single day, and that's not even going into the fancy dancy stuff that we're going to talk about later. Yeah,
I mean, when I was in primary school, we had one smart board in the whole school. In primary 7 they got brought in, but it was like the ones with the big arm and the projector, and I remember them, they were kind of brutal.
And you used to have to calibrate them. I remember that. I loved getting to calibrate the board.
Of course you
It was like that, those games that they play on the game shows and they have to press the buzzers when it lights up. I felt like I was in that game. I don't think that was invented at that point.
That's quite sad. But the one smartboard we had, I think, was actually made by Smartboard. I don't think it was a Promethean board. I think it was a smartboard, and it had 4 pens in the front, and you could wheel it about the place. But I think you had to still project onto it. So I remember that, and I remember thinking this was the coolest thing ever, but it was always broken. So there's always big steps that we take to get to where we are now. So if you'd said to someone 20 years ago, oh, by the way, instead of a blackboard, you're going to have a massive TV
that's touch screen
attached to your wall, that's touch screen, that is really quite touch sensitive. Like if a fly lands on it.
Oh, there's nothing more annoying than a fly landing on it and it deleting everything.
But imagine you went back 20 years and told someone that, they would laugh you out of the room, because a TV to them is something that you wheel in to the room, and you on a Friday you wheel the TV in, or if you've got a science video to show, you wheel the TV in. It's completely different. The landscape's completely changed in the last 20 years. And I like what you said there about it being integrated. And I suppose you could say that technology in the classroom is integrated and not isolated anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you still have your isolated lessons. Like I think, when you're teaching digital literacy, for example, you'd still need to teach, here's how you log in, here's how you type. Maybe not so much up the school, but down the school, I still need to teach, this is how we log in, this is what a password is, this is what a username is.
So your digital literacy.
So that stuff is isolated, I suppose. But yeah, it's integrated into everything you do. I mean, you even think about your stations. Like I think about my math stations or my guided reading stations. I always have a technology-based one, which is usually games-based learning. That takes a group of 10, 12, 8, whatever the number is, children, and they're learning independently. It's tailored to them. You couldn't have possibly done that.
No.
15 years ago, before iPads and technology really was a thing, because it wouldn't have even been possible. You wouldn't have potentially had enough devices. The resources weren't out there, whereas now you can literally log on to Sumdog and play a times table game,
not
which
sponsored.
is hashtag not sponsored, which is giving them questions on the times tables they're struggling with. So, I'm not having to sit down and say, right, recite me your 4 times table. Oh, you're a bit ropey with that. I'll give you extra questions on that. Does it for me.
Yeah. And the data, that's interesting what you said, the data that you get from some of these is kind of unparalleled. Oh, I just said kind of. Do you know what I've noticed, right, in the last listening to these episodes? I don't listen to them through full, but what I've noticed is I say kind of all the time. So,
and I say like all the time.
In this episode, I'm going to vow never to say kind of again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it or not.
Your last 2 sentences.
I know, it's so hard. Do you think, kind of circling back to our
You just said it again.
Did I?
I need to stop wheezing. I don't know why I'm wheezing today.
I know, and I cackle.
Sound like a goose.
Honestly, we're filming this and we are delirious, to be honest, because we've come back from London from a high, and we're back in school today, and it was just tired, so tired. Anyway, what was I saying? We're back on circling back to tech. The second biggest way I think that it's changed in our teaching careers, maybe, is the emphasis of tech and inclusion, and how it can allow children to access learning in a way that it hasn't before. We learnt a lot about this down in London. We listened to a couple of talks and things. Have you noticed that as well, that in your class you've noticed that, actually inclusion's been aided here by technology? Yeah,
definitely. There's things that you can, like Chromebook extensions you can add on that are just going to make life a lot easier for people who find it, or children who find it overwhelming to read. For example, your classic lesson of, go on Newsround, we're going to read the article and we're going to take notes. There's a Chromebook extension. There's actually multiple Chromebook extensions that do this. So Text Help is one, Read Write is another one, where you can kind of simplify the website down, or you can put an overlay over it.
Yep.
And simplifying the website, I don't mean you simplify the text. It just pulls out all of, the ads and the bright colours and the distractions, and it can put it into a different text format for your learners.
I think even Safari has that on it, and the iPads, you just do reader view.
Yep, and it'll take away all of that, and you can put overlays on and things like that just make learning a lot more accessible. And then you've also got things that are integrated into, Microsoft has amazing integrations, and was on a live as well. We were speaking about this. So someone had asked about a student who was EL and didn't speak any English, spoke very little English, and they wanted them to be able to access the class novel. So I suggested, it's a wee bit long-winded, but if you want to sit and type out the chapter, you can sit and type it out. But Office Lens, you can scan a page of a book and it'll put it into a Word document for you.
Yep.
And then from there, you can go into Immersive Reader on Word. So I think it's in the View tab at the top. View tab, Immersive Reader, and that will firstly put it into like a larger size font, and it'll space it a bit better.
Yeah, it does.
Put a background on it of whatever colour you want. It also has a picture dictionary, which is really good. So if your students
I've not seen that.
are learning what a word means, they hover over it and it kind of gives you, like, the social story pictures. That it shows them what the word means via a picture.
Really?
You can also toggle on parts of speech, so nouns, verbs, adjectives, different colours, which is really good for everybody. But if your learner is EAL, you can then translate that into literally, there's hundreds of languages Microsoft translate into it, and it's actually really accurate. I find that sometimes these
from her
things
knowledge of all those different languages,
5 different languages,
she's fluent in Spanish and French.
I just mean as well, if we were speaking into it and using the dictation, it actually picks up Scottish accents really well, which is very rare. If you have seen that sketch, 11, right? That is what I feel like every time I use a dictation feature. But Microsoft one is really good. But anyway, you can go on and translate it into any language. The child can then read it. You can also put the questions in their language. They can respond in their language. So they can type out in their language or speak and have it text to speech. And then you can just translate it back instantly.
Yeah, it's quite outstanding actually what can be done.
Yeah, and that's built into all Microsoft things. So if you're using Teams, they can still read the homework description in Immersive Reader and have it translated for them. If they are doing anything on a Microsoft program, a PowerPoint, you can put a PowerPoint on and you can put subtitles over it, which as you speak in English, it will translate it to that child's language.
That's frightening, isn't it?
And it's really quick. And I used it a couple of years ago with one of my students and they said it was really accurate. They spoke a little bit more English so they could actually discuss it. But, you know, those kind of things are just integrated in there. Yeah. But this is one of the great things about being down at that show. So there's so many things that we use that we just sat there and thought, I had no idea the capability of these.
It opened up a lot of doors, didn't it?
These things, Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we went to see, which links to this, was and there was a girl from Love Island. What's her name again?
Tasha Guri?
Tasha, yeah. And she was giving a talk on. She's deaf, so she was giving a talk on.
She wears a cochlear implant.
Yeah, and she's a deaf kids ambassador. I think she was even before. Someone said she was that before she went on Love Island as well. But she was speaking about her experience of primary school being really inclusive. She gave us such a nice example that her head teacher realised everyone was like crying in the room. Her head teacher realised that she was struggling. She couldn't hear, like people were putting her up the back of the class, that kind of thing. And then he went out and found like a support assistant, and that support assistant learned British Sign Language and then taught pretty much the whole school British Sign Language. And they started using it with her. And I was just like, that is absolutely adorable. And it was a really nurturing environment. But then when she went to high school, it was like,
it was different.
Yeah, it was like, forget it.
Like things like teachers turning their back to write on the board, which I get in high school because there's so much content on the board. I suppose primary school lends itself a little bit differently because we don't tend to have, because for example,
do group work,
you know, if you're working in primary 2, they can't read off the board independently. Some of them, actually you get that in all stages, but don't turn your back, for example, to write on the board and keep talking because she then couldn't hear the instruction delivery. But things that we have now that could be integrated, like the subtitles. She also made a really good point, which actually I never thought about this as a teacher, but if you've got any children who struggle with their hearing, if they're maybe wearing hearing aids or cochlear implants, if you're watching a YouTube video or a news round or any sort of video, put the subtitles on. Like that sounds so silly to do. But even with your EAL learners, that's going to help with, obviously you can put them in any language, but if they can read it in their language and hear it in English, that obviously would help them. But of course, if any of your children have got difficulties with their hearing or challenges there, having those subtitles is just going to, because they can't always lip read, and you know, it's difficult when you're listening to something, especially if there's background noise or if they're speaking really fast. So have the subtitles on. It's not something I thought about really, and it's just one of those things you were sitting there going, you know, that actually makes so much sense. It's such a small change, but it makes it far more inclusive. And
I think the point to make here is that a lot of the technologies that we have integrated into things that we're already using, Microsoft Teams, you've mentioned, Word, YouTube, all these things are at our fingertips and are free, and just slight adjustments with them can be really inclusive and make learning so much more accessible for a lot of the learners in our classes. If you've been enjoying listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star positive review wherever you listen.
Obviously, with talking about inclusion and when we were listening to Tasha's experience of school, something that's really great about technology and integrating it into things is so many companies and brands have all of these resources that are out there now that are free and accessible and just represent your classroom that little bit better. So for example, Kids Bop have a ton on their website that's also supported with BSL. So they're, you know, popular songs, dance songs, things like that are then have BSL interpretations with it as well. Obviously, we've spoken about integrating BSL into our school as a third language, which is great. But I think demonstrating that to children also lets them see how others are interpreting the world. And that, even if you've not got someone in your class or your school who's using BSL, demonstrating that to the children and showing the children that is a fantastic way to just show them how, even though you're living in this classroom bubble, the world is such a large place with loads of diverse people who you can support and you can understand what's going on there if you're listening to the BSL. So that's on Kids Bop's website. They've got a ton of stuff, to be honest. They've got loads of things that are free resources on there that you can go and have a look at, worksheets, dance alongs, sing-alongs, all of those things, songs in different languages that you can go and listen to that are very much available to you, that you can go on and have a little go of just to promote that inclusion. We
were speaking to a lot of teachers down in England now. The majority of our audience is from England, and our experience of this is a little bit different. So in Scotland, we have something called inclusion, which a lot of people have, but it's a kind of, I said kind of. It's a policy that all children are included in mainstream schools. Well, the majority of children are included in mainstream schools. Whereas in England, there's more of a
kind of
range
SEN bases and things.
Yeah, there's more of a range of opportunities and options for children to go to with different needs and things. And so when we speak about inclusion, we were speaking to these teachers about it in a way that was slightly different.
Yeah,
because they were like, maybe didn't have as many children with as many needs in front of them because they weren't teaching in that kind of school or whatever. So that was interesting. So what I would say is to people that are in England or, if they're not dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, just to keep it in mind that technology involved in inclusion is not some big fancy stuff that you need to go out and buy.
I think you also, though, when you're thinking about technology-based inclusion and things you can do, sometimes not backlash, but the kind of argument for that is if a child is doing writing, they should be pen to paper writing, right? You always get this when we post a video about it. We always get, what's not wrong with a good old pen and paper? And I'm like, well, what's wrong with a good old pen and paper is the anxiety you've created by forcing children to sit with a pen and paper who don't see words on the page the same way as you or I do. And whilst you can't put yourself in their position and picture it the way that they can, you have to be a bit empathetic towards that. And if you're focused on, like we've been focusing on expanding sentences, right? We've got on all the way through how to write a basic sentence. What is it? It's subject, verb, full stop, right? All the way from that. Now we're adding that detail in. So to me, you being able to sit and handwrite it, if you handwrite it, I have to scribe it, right? And you're not learning anything if I write on the board. Even if we make it up together, we do that sometimes and I'll encourage them on their own. But if you just scribe from me, all you're learning to do is form the letters. You're not learning the spelling pattern. You're not necessarily learning how to expand that sentence. Whereas if I can give you, now I don't say I give a Chromebook out every single time they do writing, but if I can give you a Chromebook out and you can get a little bit of independence, because let's be at that age, they're kind of becoming more self-aware of, right, I'm always sitting with the teacher. I'm always going to a different room to get some help. They get a bit more self-conscious at that age as well. So if I can give you a Chromebook and you can speak that sentence in, I can still see you know how to structure a sentence, because you still need to be able to say, instead of the dog sat on the mat, you can say the fluffy brown dog sat on the mat. And do you know what? That's fine.
Wow.
That's very descriptive, I know. But if I can see you can do that, that's the learning intention. We are learning to expand sentences. It's not we are learning to expand sentences and only handwrite it with a pen and paper. Like, that's not what I'm focusing on. So if you can do that skill, but verbally, and still get everything the way I'm looking for it, I'm fine with that. So I'm just kind of defending myself before it becomes a question, of what's wrong with just writing it down on a jotter like we used to do.
Yeah, and when you actually think about 21st century skills, the last time I hand wrote something was probably in high school,
Yep.
When I go to university, everything's typed and things like that.
Yep.
Anyway, talking more about BET, our time down south, we spent 3 days at a conference. It was an EdTech conference. It was
huge.
Phenomenal.
30,000 steps on Thursday.
I thought you were going to say there was 30,000 people there. So it was in the Excel Centre in London. And we got taken down by the company BET or Hive, who put these events on. And we were just kind of, that's the third time, right?
This is going to be a nightmare for Mark to edit, because you're going to have to cut
keep
every
it
time
in.
you
No,
say
because I need to be accountable. 100%. I need to be accountable. We went down and we had many takeaways from it. not like not Chinese and Indian takeaways. We had.
If my PT is listening to this, I did not have a takeaway every single night. Okay,
we actually ate pretty well. We had many takeaways in terms of what we learned about technology in education.
Yep.
So, for example, we thought we knew quite a lot. We thought we were pretty, and don't get me wrong, we were clued up. Like when we went down, we knew most of the companies that were down there. We just maybe were surface level with them.
Yeah.
And what we learned was, number one, there's a lot of money in education. There's not a lot of money in ed tech, that's for sure.
Not in schools though.
And the gap between schools and these companies is huge. I don't know if you want to speak to that just for a moment of like, wow, that moment when we walked in.
I mean, it was interesting because when we walked, to put it into a bit of context here, our flight got cancelled, so we were all in a bit of a tizzy. Like we ended up at a different airport than we were planning on getting to. We have not got a sense of direction between the pair of us.
It was terrible.
So,
it was awful.
Who knows where we could have ended up if we had to actually go anywhere other than just one train line the whole way there. But when we walked in, everyone had kind of, all the other people who were there, all the content creators had met up and had a chance to get their bearings. We were kind of thrown in at the deep end because we just got there and we met everybody. And when we were walking around about maybe 2:00 after a couple of hours, I just kind of looked at you and I was like, do you have imposter syndrome right now? Because the scale of this was
mad.
Insane. So most of the companies had, smart boards with them or just massive screens. Like the Canva screen was huge, probably bigger than the kind of the board sitting behind us. It was massive. And there's people on microphones doing live sessions with chairs out. And it was just insane the amount of funding and money in that room from the companies. And I know in England it works slightly differently. Obviously in England, schools are kind of run by trusts a lot of the time. We didn't really know this. We were speaking to Mr. Hill, Mr. H on TikTok if you follow him, and he was kind of explaining it to us how it works for him and his school. In Scotland, pretty much every single school is run by the council. You've got private schools, but obviously you have to pay to go to those schools. So when we were walking around, we were thinking, all of these things would be great. That there was a Wi-Fi one, for example. It was talking about how they run this incredible Wi-Fi. There was also a laptop.
At Old Trafford, I was like, why are you here? They were like, we run the Wi-Fi at Old Trafford. I was like, okay, can you give it to us? Can we get some?
For example, we couldn't do that because it's authority ran. We don't have any say in that. But there's also like laptops for teachers, which looked insane. And I can't remember the company. I can't remember the company, but all of these things that were integrated, like silly little things, like they're splash proof. Yeah. Because we all know classrooms can be a bit chaotic. Yeah. And all of these things these laptops were doing, which were just designed for teachers, they looked incredible. I was so jealous watching everybody use these. I was like, this is what I need in my life. But again, we couldn't just go out and make that decision. No. Whereas in some schools, if you're run by a trust, they've got the purchasing power, but we don't have that.
It's all centralised in Scotland.
Yeah, so it was very different. I think if you were to put something like that on in Scotland, you maybe wouldn't have the same kind of... I think the same amount of people would go. You would still have the same amount of interest, but be very different for companies because it would be more about education based rather than educating people how to use it rather than selling it.
I think there would be more representatives from local government as well that would have to turn up if you were going to be able to buy anything. Yeah. But some of the things that when we walked in, we actually did stop after a couple of hours and say, I've never said this before, but we actually said, I'm actually quite overwhelmed here. It was a bit like... Who do we
think we are?
This is, there's a lot going on here. There's so many people. There's so many business people like flying about. Yeah. And we just felt quite small.
I think the first day was a lot of getting used to it. Yeah, the first day was a lot of adjusting.
Yeah. And one of the things that we took away was the gap between the money in that room compared to schools. And I made a TikTok about this, deleted it because it got like 3 views. But
TikTok does not like when you go to London for 3 days and make videos to Hannah Montana songs. It might have been that.
Well, I made a video about this because it was on my mind that I just couldn't equate the fact that there was, millions of pounds of technology on show in that room. Easily. Facebook was there, Meta, Google was there, Microsoft was there, Adobe was there, Canva was there, Kahoot was,
everybody, Google,
everyone that you could think of was there. Apart from Amazon and Apple, didn't really see much from them. There's a wee Amazon thing. But anyway.
That was a different conference.
Was it?
We walked by, it was like a medical one or something.
Oh, right, okay.
That was on the Friday, I think.
I don't know that they're too much in education anyway, so. But it was just like, where's this money?
Yeah.
It's all in these massive companies. And yes, they do things for schools. Like, for example, Canva does an amazing free, education account.
It's only going to get better as well. So if you're not on the education hype, Canva educator hype, you need to get on it. We speak about this all the time, but like if you listen to one thing from today, let it be that.
Yeah. And I was just like, a lot of the companies do things like they'll, instead, if you can't buy things, we were speaking to Creative Hut, if you can't buy the Lego kits or whatever, they'll come out to the school and let you use them for the day. So there's a lot of giving back to the community. I know these companies have to make money. That's how they run. But it was just a bit like, oh my goodness.
Overwhelming, yeah.
We're hunting about for a glue stick, sometimes, and there's a robot dog walking about at my feet. It was just like, it was worlds apart from what I'm used to.
It was. And, it let you see as well all the ways you could enhance practice with all of these incredible things. I mean, I feel like the edtech industry is about 20 years ahead of education itself.
Yeah, I would agree.
When we were in that room, I was looking at all these things and I'm like, flabbergasted at what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is what we're going to be not competing with, but trying to integrate in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
But in 20 years' time, the edtech industry will be another 20 years ahead. It's like honestly, it was like stepping into some sort of futuristic world being in that room, because even like you said, Meta were there, and the things they were doing, I thought I knew Meta relatively well. I thought in my head, kind of got the gist of what they're doing. I had no idea they had such a big part of it, or they were aiming to become a big part of education.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
And it was all to do with VR headsets and everything.
Yes.
And it was everyone was talking about the virtual, virtual field trips you could go on and all this.
Yeah.
Someone said to us, the big focus last year was VR and the big focus this year was AI. And I think we would agree with that. And I think if we went next year, most of the companies, the AI companies that were there, won't be there next year.
They might be because we were talking about this, about the AI kind of tools that you've got out there. Some of the AI tools that you have are kind of isolated, whereas I think when AI first came out, it wasn't like it just appeared out of nowhere, but ChatGPT sort of started it all.
Yeah.
ChatGPT now generates images as well, but originally ChatGPT was just
text.
It was conversation. Now you go on to, for example, Lesson Lab AI, who weren't at BET, but
not
it's
sponsored.
One that I like to use, and like TeachMate, for example. You go onto those and there are hundreds of options of things you can do. Like you can chat to a historical figure, you can respond to an email, you can write a tweet, you can write Instagram captions, you can write a school website.
Policy document,
Hundreds of things that are all on one website. Whereas if you go on to ChatGPT, it just writes you one bit of text and like this one chat that you need to go back and get.
Or you get the pro version and it does more.
Yeah. So all these companies that are integrating all these things that can do everything in one, and then you've got like your Canva and your Microsoft who are starting to
Adobe,
bring out their own AI features and integrating them into their programs.
Yeah.
It's just becoming a part of, they move so fast. They move so quickly. You can't keep up.
Yeah. And I think that is the point that we were making, that some of these companies had a single AI focus. So I saw one and it was about chatting to historical figures. That's all they were, their AI. And I was like, I've seen that in like 3 other AIs that do 500 other things.
Yeah.
And so all these things are going to get integrated, and one website that's doing it really well is obviously Canva. They have like 5 or 6 AI tools for their design tools, which are great. And the Magic Write, if you're a teacher, if you want to go on and use, like, kids can use it, they get a free account. The Magic Write is, do you want to talk about how it works?
It's also really easy to set. I'll chat about how you actually get this account, because I feel like we've posted this before and people didn't know.
You've got 30 seconds.
So everyone in Scotland has a Glow email account, even if you don't use it.
Yeah.
Sign up with your Glow email account. It registers the @glow.sch as a school account, and you don't need to send any evidence.
Yeah.
Some people sign in with their like authority account, so at Dundee City, whatever it is, .co.uk. I don't know if that's it. I just made that up. But anyway, then you need to send proof that you're a teacher, because that would be like the whole authority would have those emails. Yep. So sign in with your Glow account. If your email has some sort of school in it, it'll work, and you can set up your class. So I just press invite by code, and the kids can log on to Canva. They can log in through Google or Glow, whatever you use, and they just put the code in, and they're in there. You can set assignments, you can set everything. But the magic write is amazing. So you go and you prompt it. It kind of works like ChatGPT. You prompt it whatever you're looking for, and it will write you anything that you ask it to, basically. So the most recent way I used it, we're working on literal, inferential and evaluative questions, and I wanted a Christmas themed short passage that I could print out, and I stuck it onto big bits of paper, and they wrote some literal, inferential and evaluative questions about it. And I just went into, I tried to make it related, and you're going to hate me because you always make fun of me about my kindness elf, okay? It was a story that Snowflake, the kindness elf, it was about Snowflake, the kindness elf. AI. She was just trying to, make it relatable, a little snowflake. So I asked AI to write me a story kind of going with the theme of Snowflake, the kindness elf, and
that's so cringe.
Going on a kindness mission. So it wasn't...
Oh, a kindness mission.
You can tell he doesn't teach the little ones, right? So it was this story, and I wanted it to be like about the class that I teach, because I wanted them to be interested in it rather than just picking any old story off of a website where you can download resources that I won't name. So you can go on and get it made into, and you can put your students' names in it if you wanted to make it a bit more interesting, or like the class name or your school name or whatever. And it wrote this amazing story. And the great thing is you can kind of prompt it to change. So if it comes back and I think my one came back and it was really straightforward words, and we were focusing on good vocabulary because I wanted their inferential questions to be, what do you think the word magnificent means, for example? So I asked it to just change some of the words to be a little bit more interesting, a little bit trickier, and it came back and it edited those words to make them better, and the passage worked. Again, I kept the other version for some learners, and then I could differentiate it literally in 30 seconds. I didn't need to come up with any ideas. That wrote the story. It was relatable. It was there. It included, they loved it.
But the thing about the magic, right, is you can then send that to your learners on their Chromebooks. But if you did it on ChatGPT or something, it would be like, you've got to copy and paste it into a Word document, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it does it in-house, so then you can send it to them and they can work on assignments in it, and you can put the questions in the one document, blah, blah, blah. It is amazing. And the Canva team were lovely. We actually went out with them. We chatted to them. They invited us out and we met some cool people. Is there one, apart from Canva, is there one thing, one piece of technology that you thought was like way out there and you thought was cool, or one that you maybe thought, I could just take that into my class tomorrow? Yeah,
I think from one of the, if we're talking like hardware, one thing that I think was really quite impressive. I wish I got what these were called, but we were over at Creative Hub and we were speaking to them.
Yes. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
There was a couple things there that I really liked, but one was, I would definitely more for younger ones, but I find when you've got the coding devices for younger ones, I'm talking like Spheros, all of that, I find they're quite hard to use for the little ones. And we're speaking about Spheros, and whilst I love Spheros, they just want to go and get the drive feature and roam them about and like bash them into each other. They don't actually want to code. Whereas this little guy was the cutest. It was a little cube, and was it a panda? Looked like a panda. And it came with a pen, so it was very much, it had blocks of code that looked like jigsaw puzzles. So you would put it down and you would tap the pen. So it was very much allowing younger students to see what coding would look like, as in it's like a jigsaw puzzle that needs to be pieced together. You can't have any gaps, but also allowed them to understand the kind of process of if-then statements and now-next statements, all of that would then be great for them in the future. And then also had a bunch of like social emotional tools you could use. Amazing. So they had tiles. They had tiles with like facial expressions and the emotions, and they would press the pen onto the tile, like the jigsaw piece, and this little guy would show the emotion.
That was a bit freaky.
Honestly,
I,
I know, but it was such a great tool for visualizing everything, even cool. for things like angles and shape. You know, you can talk about a square has four sides, put the puzzles in, and it doesn't need to be a technology lesson, even though you're using it, especially if your students are confident. It can be for anything. But there was so much of creative art that was just
they had so much
that I
stuff
loved.
That was cool.
I just could have been there for hours playing with all those things.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I personally loved the robot dog. I actually felt myself getting, I don't know what you would use this for in education, but I felt myself getting quite attached to this. We don't know who
was controlling it.
And it was just this robot dog walking about, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm actually getting emotionally attached to a robot dog, which was a bit strange.
Because you don't even like dogs.
I don't even like dogs, but I like robot
Red
dogs.
Flag.
It was a bit strange, I'm not going to lie. We've spoken briefly about, well, the main focus of the conference was AI, and so if we're talking about tips for teachers, where do you see the future of AI in schools, and where can people just dip their toe in right now accessibly? Like, if you're a teacher and you've never used AI before, where would be your first step?
I think if you're wanting to, it depends how you want to use it, right? If you want to utilize it to cut your workload
I thought you were going to
down,
say cut corners. If you want to use it to
not to cut corners. If you want to use it to utilize your own time, like if you want to cut your own time down, or if you want to use it for your students, they're two different things. I would say. I mean, using it to help your students in turn does cut down your kind of workload.
Yeah.
Obviously, that example I gave earlier where it wrote out a text. If you're, for example, forever sitting in front of your laptop and on a Sunday night you're thinking of sentence examples and you need 10 sentences, or you need a spelling list,
stick it into an AI.
Put it into an AI.
Yeah.
So we mentioned TeachMate and Lesson Lab. Lesson Lab and TeachMate have got free options you can go on and use, and obviously there's paid options as well. Mm-hmm. But I would say those paid options are...
we are not sponsored by any of those, but we use them.
I personally find the paid options worth it because I use it quite a lot, but that is also because I'm relatively confident that...
But for the price of a coffee a month, that's such a salesman thing to say, and we are not selling it. It's not ours. We are not affiliated at all.
No, not at all.
We just like it.
I couldn't sell anything if I tried. So.
I know. We just like it.
I think if you're wanting to use it for that, give it a go. Mm-hmm. Go and ask it to type out 10 sentences about a fairy tale castle or... fronted adverbials, whatever it is you're looking for, and just generate some examples for you first. Now, obviously, with the kind of AI, you have a lot of responsibility to make sure you're actually using it properly. You're not abusing it. You're not taking it too far and using it for it can't replace you as a job. You can't use it for every single thing you do, and you still need to check it. If I just asked AI to type out a story and didn't bother checking it and uploaded it to my slides, I'd be a little bit concerned. It's never going to be perfect. You need to go in and double check it, make sure it's fine, make sure it's the correct level for your students, all the things you would do. So if you're wanting to use it for that, give it a go with something small like that. Mm-hmm. And then you can maybe utilize it for projects and getting your students involved. Your students can go on and generate an image to go with their story descriptions. If you're working on good story descriptions, Canva have the magic image. I can't actually remember what it's called now. That's really frustrating. But
the good thing with that is people think, well, that's a bit weird. But actually what you can teach through that, and I've taught through this as well, this just as an aside, the more specific vocabulary you put into the AI, the more specific your picture or more accurate your picture is going to be. So what you then teach to your students is, okay, the more specific vocabulary you use in your description here, the better the image is going to be.
You can't just say the blue house.
Exactly. Whereas so you can then teach description and show why good description actually helps visualize an image.
The blue house surrounded by pink and purple flowers in a fairy tale forest with a cobblestone path.
Yeah.
You're going to get a much better image.
Exactly. Well, that was really off the cuff there. That was good. I think personally, I think AI, the future of AI is in teacher workload, like you've said, reduction. And I spoke to Mr. P. Lee Parkinson about this as well when we were down there, and he was speaking about, he thinks that AI is the way that we claw some time back as teachers.
Absolutely.
So for example, how do I write a policy document? There's an example one already there.
You don't need to use it. You don't need to use it for your policy, but you go in and you've got the bones of a policy.
How do I write a letter to parents about a situation that I've never done before when I'm a young teacher? Boom. There's an example. You're not going to take it word for word. You're going to edit it and put your own details in. But
that's when I'd be wary though of using one that isn't specifically education related. So if you went and asked ChatGPT to respond, ChatGPT is wrong quite a lot of the time. So especially if you're a new teacher, you might not know that. So if you're going to do something like that, like a letter or a policy, I would use one of the teacher specific ones because that obviously has an algorithm built in to know what you're talking about.
Do you know what I used Lesson Lab for once? It was think of PE activity games.
Yeah.
There's like an activity games one, and I was like, I don't know what to do for gymnastics. I'm kind of lost here. And I put it in, and it gave me a full lesson. I was like,
there's also one on there that's called it's like, tell me about this like I'm 5 or 10, and it's so good because let's be real, right? As primary school teachers, you don't always, I open up the grammar textbook, and especially because some of it is very English related, like we don't teach it. Well, we teach it, but we maybe don't refer to it in the same way. As we do in Scotland. And sometimes I open that up, especially when I was teaching primary 7. I don't know what that is. So
I was teaching
you have to go on and
that
teach me like I'm 5. Like explain this to me like I am a 5-year-old.
so I can explain it.
See on a Monday morning when I'm really tired.
Yeah.
I need that in my life. But it's got even like maths generating questions, like just so many things that you can think. See if you need a time filler as well. You know those days when you're caught out and you go, oh, the lesson is finished 20 minutes earlier than I thought. Oops. Maths questions, boom, let's do these.
Yeah, so I think definitely teacher workload is where the future of it's heading. That seemed to be the kind of vibe. Oh, kind of. That's 4. The vibe that I also get made fun of for the way I say vibe. Apparently it's vibe. Apparently it's supposed to be vibe, and I say vibe. Anyway, what I wanted to bring to your attention kind of before... Sorry. I just said it again. I just said kind of again. What I wanted to bring to your attention before we stop, I did a little bit of research and thought, where's the future of tech heading in Scotland? This is more specific to Scotland, but I'm quite positive that English policy documents are similar in age.
Yep.
In the last year or two, artificial intelligence has made its way up to the top. VR has made its way up to the top. All these different big conversations about the efficacy of them, the reliability of them, all this stuff, right? And I thought, how up to date is our policy documents in Scotland?
Interesting.
2016 was the latest one I could find. It was the Scottish Government Digital Learning and Teaching, written in 2016. Now we're talking 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And in that 8 years we've had pandemic and all that stuff. Technology's really come to the fore. I would imagine they're updating it. I wouldn't want to say that, but I would imagine they've got to be updating it because 8 years old is like... We felt like
we were behind being at that conference. We felt like we were living in basically a Victorian era. And we said we feel like we're quite clued up, but standing there I'm going... I don't have a Ferrari game in my classroom.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that would be fun if anybody wants to donate that.
100%.
I will take the Ferrari game.
So I'm going to read it to you a little bit from this document, and there was 4 key aims, and I want to see what your views are. And if you're listening along as well, I want to see what your views are on whether we're meeting those aims or not.
Okay.
Or whether you feel like in your class you're meeting those aims, maybe make it a bit more personal. So it says, we published a digital learning and teaching strategy in 2016, which aims to create the conditions to allow all of Scotland's educators, learners and parents to take advantage of the opportunities offered by digital technology. This is a long sentence. In order to raise attainment, ambition and opportunities for all. That's like a catch-all statement.
Yep.
Fair enough. The strategy sets out a series of national actions and local expectations structured around 4 objectives. So here's the 4 objectives. I want you to think, am I meeting those 4 objectives, or is there anything I could do? I think we're meeting a couple of them, but I don't want to
putting you on the spot.
I know. I don't want to put anything. I think we are doing quite well with a couple of them, but I don't want to put anything into your mind. Number 1, develop the skills and confidence of teachers. This is from 2016, mind you. Mm-hmm. Develop the skills and confidence of teachers. Number 2, we can quickly go down them. Number 2, improve access to digital technology for all learners. Number 3, ensure that digital technology is a central consideration in all areas of curriculum and assessment delivery. And number 4, empower leaders of change to drive innovation and investment in digital technology for learning and teaching. Number 1, develop the skills and confidence of teachers. Do you feel like we're...
I mean, I feel like I'm confident in it, but I also...
It's all like me.
That's not what I meant, okay? However, a lot of the things I've learned have been off my own back.
Interesting.
Is something I will say. So a lot of the things I learned are because I've always been quite interested in it. I'm a YouTube kid, right?
Yeah.
I'm a YouTube... She's the generation of the YouTube kid. I wasn't an iPad kid, but I was an MSN kid, right?
Yeah.
She knows her way around a Microsoft Word document.
What I would say to that is, if you go on our councils, there are always technology-based courses. We just never go on them.
There are, but then also I feel like that sounds really big-headed to be like, I don't need to go to them, but
no, I
feel like I've got quite a good confidence level.
Okay.
But also you need to then encourage... I think sometimes when you have these technology... we spoke earlier about how when we were at school, we had one projector.
Yeah.
Right? There's people who are teaching who taught then and teach now. That is a world of a difference.
Yeah, totally.
So throwing a technology course at somebody that is really, to some advanced isn't what we need. We need step by step. here's what we're looking for and here's how you do those things, rather than we're going from having smart boards installed to now you need to use AI. Like that is a world of a difference. So you need to support people at the, like you would support your learners at the level that they need.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we're developing the skills and confidence of teachers
I do think it's
fairly
definitely
well. But I don't know
changing.
if the government are doing that or whether it is off the teachers' one back. I'm not sure.
An
Secondly,
interesting one.
improve access to digital technology for all learners. I think yes and no.
But then you have to also look at that as some authorities have one-to-one devices. If you're improving that for all, every authority needs one-to-one devices that are updated regularly enough. You know, it's getting to the point now where devices can't be updated anymore because they're older, but they're not replenished. They're not refurbed. They're not taken in. You know, we think about our phones. I get,
I know, every 2 years.
every like 3-4 years, I'm like, oh, she needs the next generation because this one's running slow.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that you need to fund
the
for
shelf life of
everybody.
technology
You need
is
to.
not long now.
To be fair, the shelf life is improving, but if you think about the early generation iPads compared to the iPads you've got now, they are. I wouldn't say there's a huge difference between the kind of later generation iPads, let's say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and now. They're not a huge difference. You know, laptops, things like that. But if you think about a Dell laptop,
Adele.
rolling in. Don't think about Adele. I mean, do you know what? If you've had that kind of day and you want to think about Adele, crack on. But not me. If you think about a Dell laptop, a Dell laptop from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and one from 2 years ago, they are not doing the same thing.
No.
These devices can't cope with the updates you're putting on them. So just updating the iPads or the laptops, all this, they cannot cope with that software. You cannot take 10-year-old hardware and put on 1 week old software. It's going to combust. Like one day I think I'm going to come in and my laptop is actually going to burst into flames because it's like, please do not update me again. I can't cope with this. It's like I'm running Windows 6. Like I don't need this. You know?
I know. I do think though, compared to when we were at school, obviously, but we're comparing it to 2016, so I would say with the introduction of Chromebooks and things, there definitely is more access. We have maybe 1 to 2 or 1 to 3.
I mean, we're kind of forced into that with COVID, weren't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose. Okay, number 3, ensure that digital technology is a central consideration in all areas of curriculum and assessment delivery. I would say, probably.
Again, I would say that is the go-to one that everyone uses the technology for is always BGE, go on and research. But I would say, we listen to stories online. We use it for use it for writing. We use it for maths. Like you can use it for putting out digital grids. Use it for coding. Like I would say
we've got a much better.
But again, that's our specific situation. So perhaps not everywhere. Yeah. Which comes back to the first point that you need to support teachers at the level they're at, rather than forcing them into feeling like they don't know anything.
Empower leaders of change. Don't know who that is, but anyway, empower leaders of change. What is that? Management? Leaders of change. That's so vague.
Leaders of change sounds more like government. Do
you think?
Level, but also they're the ones writing it. So do they mean themselves? Like,
empower us.
I don't know. I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Empower leaders of change to drive innovation and investment in digital technology for learning and teaching. I don't know that people are empowered to do that. Budget cuts have
What are we supposed to invest? I don't have anything to invest.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Because what are we to invest? Like schools we don't have the funds to invest, Or
the authority to invest.
Like
maybe it is councils.
Invest my socks. Like I don't know what you want me to do.
Yuck.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Just to kind of go over number 6. Just to go over those points and think, wee bit of reflection there. How are we actually doing? And do those points need updated in 2024? I don't know. Maybe they need updated for new technologies and things.
I also think though, as well, you're going to need to update your policies constantly to do with online, obviously, and technology has got its dangers as well. And you need to be updating that. Like I think, for example, like YouTube is blocked in so many schools that the kids can't get on YouTube. YouTube has got safety features you can turn on. I'm aware there's stuff out there that people shouldn't be watching, but I think you need to move. If you're going to put all those expectations on, you need to also move with that. So with the right to technology comes the responsibility to use it wisely. So does your school have in place a good acceptable use policy? Is your digital policy up to date to talk about the dangers of AI? Because I think sometimes when you post or you do an ed tech episode or you post about something like this online, you always get, well, this is really dangerous. The students shouldn't be using this. And, you even see it with social media. It's hard to keep up with everything that's on social media, but there's so much information out here. Scottish Government has the national aims for internet safety and cyber resilience that go through. I mean, it's a huge document, but it's worth reading. She just
rolled that right off the tongue. Wow.
This is because I was doing that last week.
I was going to say.
But there's so much out there to support all of these things that we can't just shut something off because there's bad things about it. You have to actually be willing to say, right, okay, of course there's dangers in AI, there's dangers in online gaming, but we would still promote games-based learning.
Yeah.
So you can't just shut down all AI and say, no teachers, no students, nobody's using it. That's it.
And I think what you realise when we go to conferences like the one that we went to down south, the world's moving that way.
Yeah.
So it's not that we need to just get carried along with the current, but also you need to realise that is the way that the world's moving, and you want to create people that are ready for 21st century life. You're going to have to put them in front of the technology that is out there.
Is literally to create learners who have the skills for learning and work and life.
Yeah.
So we need to do that by looking at what we've got in front of us right now, because that's the stepping stones to what's going to be in front of them in 10 years' time.
Exactly. Well, thanks for your input on all that.
On
that was
that inspirational note.
Thanks. And we're kind of going to be back next week. That was a sound.
What?
I just wanted to say kind of again. Thanks for listening to another episode of Inside Voices. Come back next week where we're going to be talking about ourselves. And remember, in here we use our inside voices.